Thank you so much, Rabbi Marty. Thank you for the schus, the privilege, your kind words. A special thank you to my dear friends and our hosts this evening, Rachel, Rachel, and Azi. Thank you for your gracious hospitality. I think, how many years are we here together in this home? Many years. And even during Corona, I was the guest speaker here. My audience consisted of 3 people, Azi, Rachel, and the dog. I'm not going to tell you who was listening most attentively. And we were, of course, far apart from each other, but you remember that one, right? So Baruch Hashem, we're here again, celebrating a new year, Tafshin Pei 5785, and all of us praying, pleading that this year be a year of true, complete victory, a year of Didan Notzach, in the words of the Medrash, a year of true liberation, emancipation, and redemption. I want to bless you, Azi and Rachel, that you should continue to be able to saturate this home with simchas and nachas and health and happiness and prosperity, materially and spiritually. La'arichis yomim v'shanim tovos. And I want to thank all of you who came out this evening. Now, Rabbi Marty did tell me to be here exactly 8, because he said in Bergenfield and Teaneck they start on time. It's not like Borough Park and the Syrians. But it looks like, instead of them learning from you, you began emulating the Hasidim in Borough Park and the Syrians in Flatbush. So I hope it's not like 3 hours late next time. Okay, I guess the good old Yekas, right, in Washington Heights, where you couldn't come a minute late, but you also didn't come a minute early. That's an art that I don't know if it exists too much today. So my dearest friends, last year I was standing here a few days before Yom Kippur. Those of you who remember, I even did a Yom Kippur Kol Nidre rendition. Not as good as the Mandel family, but we did a Yom Kippur rendition with a little humor explaining what Kol Nidre was about. Nobody imagined that just a few days later, on Simchas Torah, October 7th, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah in the Holy Land, all hell would break loose, and the Jewish people would wake up to a completely new reality that is still with us in such a profound way 1 year later. Every Jew around the world has been affected in a very visceral way. Even those of us who may not know anybody living in the South or then in the North, everybody felt that literally there was a knife that was perforating the gut of the Jewish people, of Knesset Yisrael, physically and of course emotionally, psychologically and spiritually. It's almost like a new year and a new world and a new nation. They say, why did the Chinese live so long? What gave the Chinese such longevity? So there's some theory I once saw that they have the same, they work with characters in Mandarin. The same character that they use for the word crisis, they use for the word opportunity. But in Hebrew, it's much better. In Hebrew, the word for crisis is mashber. Mashber comes from the word shvira. A breakdown is called a mashber, when something breaks, right? Matzah shvura, broken. Leiv nishbar, we say in Tehillim. What's the word for, talking about just one life, for a woman sitting on the birthing stool, giving birth to a new baby in the Tanakh? Isha yoshevet al hamashber. Interesting, because in the Jewish conception, in the Jewish Weltanschauung, every breakdown, every mashber, is really an opportunity for birthing something new. Not just one life, pun intended, but many new lives. This doesn't mean that mashber is easy. I'm not going to be the man talking about labor pains at the moment. Although actually I could, and I'll tell you why. I was once at KMR, Vermont, and I had a kidney stone attack. And it's Vermont, there's no Hatzalah, nobody comes in 6 minutes. Not every neighbor has morphine and some other medicines I'm not going to discuss publicly. This is Vermont. So it took the ambulance 3 hours to come. I was already calling the Chevra Kadisha, saying Kaddish for myself. I was almost dead. It was horrible. It was like 4 in the morning. Finally, I came to the hospital. I described the pain, and the nurse tells me, This is probably worse than labor pains. So now, Baruch Hashem, I could talk about labor pains without anybody telling me you're a male, obnoxious, pugnacious nut job. So, doesn't make labor pains easy or kidney stones easy. What it does is tell us, though, that as we breathe, but he's into breath work today, so we got to breathe. As you breathe and you process the pain, we can merit seeing a new child. The mashber is also something that breaks and creates an opening. There was another Jewish singer who once said, "Stop worshiping perfection. There is a crack in everything." That's what allows the light to come in. That's what tshuva is. There's a crack in everything. The Jewish people have experienced not just a crack, but we have experienced a mashber of titanic proportions, to the point that you may argue and say, probably quite justifiably, that this has been the most painful year, certainly one of the most painful years for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. The mashber is well known. I want to talk about the new baby that may be born. A few months ago, the Jewish world said goodbye to Senator Joseph Lieberman, Zechrona Livracha. Senator Lieberman was the senator in Connecticut for many, many years. And a true Mekadesh Shem Shemaim, his book on Shabbos, A Day of Rest, is a wonderful book and an example of a Jew who reached high echelons of politics but remained steadfast, loyal to Torah and Yiddishkeit. You might remember that he was Democratic nominee for vice president together with Al Gore. And many Jews were excited, first time in history, that a Jew might be the vice president of the United States of America. Then it used to be a yichus to be president, vice president. Today, whatever. Some people were not excited. He lost. So the story goes that that night, Joe Lieberman came home and he was dejected. He lost the elections. And as he came home, his wife Hadassah Lieberman, Zelain Gayorin, greeted him. And she said, "Joe, you look sad." He said, "Yeah, I thought maybe I'll be vice president. I lost the election." She said, "Joe, you don't have to be sad. In this house, you will always remain vice president." A few years ago, I had a lecture in Miami, and I needed to catch a flight back home. It was actually right before Yom Kippur. And of course, my taxi didn't come, Uber didn't come, and I was desperate to make it to the airport. It was a last-minute thing. And suddenly I see Joe and Hadassah Lieberman coming out of the hotel, getting into a beautiful car, and my hunch was they're going to the airport. So I went over and I said, "I'm now going to do something very, very not nice. My mother and wife would be very upset with me. You're going on your honeymoon, but I really need a lift to the airport. Would you mind, Senator Lieberman, if I go into the front seat? I'll be as dumb and deaf as the driver. I won't hear what you're saying. You can have your private honeymoon. I just need a lift to the airport." He said, "With pleasure." But as I came into the front seat, as I say in Yiddish, I couldn't contain myself. So I turned around and I said, "Forgive me for intruding into this honeymoon. But I've been saying a joke about both of you for years. It's a good joke. Somebody sent it. I don't remember who made it up. Maybe I made it up. Maybe somebody else made it up. You know, it's Jewish jokes. There's like 600 and we recycle them. We're in the recycling business. 100 about wives, 100 about mothers-in-law, another 100 about lawyers, rabbis, doctors, 100 about God, and then 100 about food or therapy. So I told them this joke and I said, could you tell me if it's true? I just want to know. I couldn't care less if it's not, but it's a good vart, right? But so Hadassah told me it's a good story. Yeah. But there's a moral in the story. The moral in the story is that every person needs to know their position in life, including a husband. That's not always easy. That's why we marry Jewish wives. To share with us our position. Ezer kenegdoi, as the Netziv explains. What does it mean to be a Jew? What is the position of a Jew in this world? October 12th, 2023, there was a demonstration at UNC, University of North Carolina. This was a few days after October 7th. It's Thursday, October 12th, 2023. Of course, the demonstration was pro-Hamas and anti-Israel. What else would you expect from a distinguished university in North Carolina? This was literally a few days after October 7th. The evidence was just coming out. The videos were coming out. Everybody was still in complete shock, as many are still now. Completely surreal. And there they were demonstrating from Palestine, from the sea, from the river to the sea, etc. One Jewish professor in UNC, who's secular, but he teaches at the university, saw what was happening, and though being very secular, and now an American, he ran out and he began screaming at the protesters. You're a bunch of Nazis, you're Nazis, you're supporting genocide, bloodshed, violence, you're haters. And a fight broke out to the point that the police had to escort him out officially for his own safety. They took him away and his protests were over. Later in that afternoon, he came into the auditorium or to the hall or to the classroom where he lectures, and he stood up at his lectern, at his podium, to deliver his lecture in the university. When he finished, a girl, a female student who sits in his class, came over to him with a beautiful, nice, elegant rose, and she presented it to him. He was surprised. Not usually what you give the professor before or after class. He says, "What's this?" She says, "I watched you screaming at the pro-Hamas demonstrators, and I was so proud of you. You were a lone voice of sanity and justice in a sea of chaos and hatred and violence. I simply want to express my appreciation by giving you this rose as a gesture of saluting you and validating you and thanking you." He looked at her and said, "Thank you, that's very sweet of you. You must be Jewish." She said, "No, I'm not Jewish." So he says, "So why would you care that I went to the demonstration? You went to get me a rose." She says, "What do you mean, why do I care?" "Because you are the chosen people." He looks at her and says, "Come on, you have been sitting in this classroom for a while. You know that I'm an atheist. You know that I don't believe in the chosen people. We are not the chosen people. And you know this about me. I am a devout Jewish atheist. Why would you say this to me?" She looks at him and she says, "Professor, you may not believe it, but we all know it." This was her response. I found that to be so succinct and powerful. You know, people have often asked me over the years, Jonathan mentioned the Amunah series, one of the big questions in our generation from young, intelligent Jews is, can an intelligent person believe that the Torah is really divine? That every word of the Torah was dictated to Moses by the creator of the world? I mean, come on. We know the culture is nice and interesting. We have no problem with gefilte fish, sushi, and even Chinese food on a bad day. We're fine with the knedlach and the latkes and some of the rituals. We're good. But for an intelligent person who studied science, physics, cosmology, who may even know a thing or two about quantum mechanics or neuroscience, to really accept that this one document called the Hebrew Bible is divine, Torah min hashamayim, in today's generation, in 2024, this is a question I've been asked for years by students, by friends, by Jews all across the globe probably. And an intelligent question, an important question. I think as far as we know, there's probably approximately 12,000 religions that we know about. Many more that are obsolete. 12,000. Most people can't mention maybe 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, you know Christianity, and you probably heard of Islam as well, and another few, but there are around 12,000. So all of them are myths. And this one religion of Yiddishkeit is emes la'amita, is ultimately true. It's a good question. And I say to them, maybe never has the authenticity of Torah been proven and demonstrated in such a conspicuous, dramatic, vivid way as in the year 2023 and 2024. 5784 in the Jewish calendar, Tavshin Pei Dalet, from Shmini Atzeres throughout the year. Never. Because how does a rational person explain the following fact? That here was literally the worst day in the Jewish country, in the Jewish state since the Holocaust. Babies were burnt alive. Families were burnt alive, tied, mutilated. What happened to women, I'm not going to get into it, you know these stories. The violation, the beheading, in middle of the raping, the beheading. Stories that you heard in about 1648 and 1649. And the group said we would do it again and again and again. That's a quote. That means till all 6.6 million Jews in Israel, Kein Yirbu, are in ovens, they wouldn't be satisfied. So a little country the size of Dallas International Airport goes to fight this group. And within a few days, there are demonstrations all over the world supporting Hamas by groups that have dedicated their lives to enlightenment, to liberalism, to progressiveness, to fighting for human rights against discrimination and bigotry and racism. Nobody's saying anything. And then you looked at the finest academic institutions. Jewish mothers and fathers, their dream was for a century and a half to send their kids to Harvard. It was the dream. $400,000 tuition to send your kids to an institution where they come out not knowing the difference between Hitler and Churchill. Give the money to Marty Katz. You maskim? Huh? The Grosse Columbia, the Grosse Harvard, the Grosse Yale, that American Jews had mysterious nefesh. We made it. We were integrated. Let's face it. Post-Holocaust American Jewry was on a high, was on a euphoric utopia. Who needs Mashiach? Who needs Mashiach? You have a state of Israel where Jews can live safely, at least relatively speaking. You have a diaspora where Jews, for the first time in history, were given equal rights, can be integrated into every sector of society, have reached unprecedented success. They felt sometimes more American than Americans. And we were proud of it. And Jews felt finally, the anti-Semitism is gone. It's obsolete. Never again. It's a new generation of educated people who understand nobody wants to hate. We want to live in peace. And millions of Jews woke up at October 7th and like, what is going on? They're rubbing their eyes in disbelief. How do they explain this? How do you explain this? And it's fascinating. And I'm going to tell you numbers that you may not believe me, but you can Google it afterwards. You can even Google while I'm talking. I don't mind. You know how many civilians were killed in Syria in the last few years? Civilians were killed in Syria by their own government, including through chemical warfare, through gas. 300,000 civilians were killed. I didn't see one demonstration in Columbia or in Oxford or in Harvard University. Not one. You know how many people were killed in Ethiopia, friends? Civilians. Anybody knows? 600,000. I didn't hear of one demonstration. 5 million civilians in the Congo, dead, killed. 3 million in Darfur, 200,000 in Chechnya. Not one demonstration. This is all recent years. Not a single demonstration anywhere. Even according to Hamas, Israel killed 40,000 people. Half of them Hamas, probably 90%. Demonstrations all over the place. Fascinating. Do you know how many German civilians were killed in the Second World War? Anybody knows how many German civilians, not Nazis, not soldiers in the Wehrmacht, German civilians were killed. 3 million were killed by the Allies. I never heard Churchill or Roosevelt apologize. I never heard Winston Churchill apologizing to Germany. You know why? Hitler is at fault, not Churchill. He began a war. What was Britain supposed to do? Sit back and allow all the British to die? The Japanese attacked American servicemen, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 41. They killed 2,300 servicemen. How many Japanese civilians were killed in the Pacific War? 1 million. I never heard Truman apologize. The Japanese began a war. They killed 3,000, 2,000. What do you want us to do? Just stay silent, have another million American soldiers die, as was the statistic in 1945? You know how many civilians were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq by America due to the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIS? 400,000 civilians. I didn't hear not Bush the father, not Bush the son, not Obama, not Trump, not even Biden apologize. Al-Qaeda attacks us, we should apologize. Suddenly here, everything is transformed. Israel is the genocidal regime, and intellectuals, essayists, websites, journalists, professors, academics, liberal students, from across the board, Jews suddenly asked, Makara, what happened? Who is insane over here? What is going on? How do you explain this? And the truth is, there's no way to explain it. Only one way. If the Torah is true, then we get it. If the Torah is true, of course we get it. Which is why the identity crisis of the Jewish people today, when it's divorced from Torah, is much deeper than people imagine. Because we have tried to do everything right, but we never get it right. We are forever the evil, heinous people, criminals at our core, at our DNA. We never get it right. And we're asking, what else could we change? Our noses we changed. We did nose jobs. We did cosmetic surgery, spiritual surgery, psychological surgery, emotional surgery. We already crippled ourselves from every last remnant of Jewishness. We have out-Gentiled the Gentiles gewaldig. It's like perfect, impeccable. What else can we do? One of my favorite stories I once heard from a therapist, it's an old Yiddish joke, but it's very, very deep. It's a deep story. It sounds funny, like all my jokes, but some of them are deep. There was once, Reb Marty, sorry. Can I trouble you for the cup? I'm still of the belief that a speaker should not drink from the bottle when standing in front of people. What I do in my kitchen is not your business. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya b'dvareh. So there was this Jewish fellow, a Feinschmecker. You know what a Feinschmecker is? You have them in Bergenfield? You don't, but you heard about it. Anyway, this Feinschmecker got this most expensive silk material for his suit. He comes to the famous Schwartz. Schwartz is the best tailor in the shtetl. And he says, I need a suit, azoinsen azalches, that when I show up at an event, everyone stops and with bated breath, they just look at me. Schwartz says, you came to the right man. Come back in 6 weeks. Yankel comes back in 6 weeks. Schwartz puts on the suit. Psst. Yankel takes a look in the mirror. It's beautiful, he says, but the right sleeve is so short. Like, it doesn't come down to the end. It's a pasnish. It's not nice. He says, that's true. With this material, I couldn't go down all the way. It would stretch too much and I would ruin it. But you know what? It's very, very good to keep your hands flexible. So when you put on the suit, you'll bend in your hand, which is it's not a bad stretch. You'll bend in your hand azoi, and the suit will come till the end. Beautiful, okay. So now he's like this. Takes a look at the left leg. It doesn't come down all the way. He says, what do I? He says, that's true. But everybody knows today we do yoga. And in yoga, it's very important to stand on one leg. So this is very good practice. When you wear this suit, you're going to pick up your left leg azoi. The suit will fit perfectly, and you're going to look amachaya. Wonderful. But he says, but here, the shoulder, the suit is so elevated, it looks grotesque. He says, that's true. In Pilates, they teach you that the shoulder should be able to go up and down at will, because Jews sit with stiff shoulders as though they're sitting a whole day like this, and all their stress and anger and resentment is in their shoulder. That's why every Jew I know and I ever met has pain in the shoulder and in the neck and in the back. And they're going from one surgery to another surgery, from one chiropractor to another chiropractor, from one therapist to another therapist. Everything is there. But with you, I arrange that you'll be able to be a whole day. You'll be able to be like this, down, up and down, and you'll be perfect. He says, but one thing, the left waist, it's mamish protruding. He says, that's true. One of the healthiest things you could do in exercise is get those waists protruding. It's very, very good for you. Really good. It's also good for the adrenaline. It's good for the nervous system. It gets you into prefrontal. It's good for a lot of stuff. It's good for your trauma. Wonderful. Yankel puts on the suit. He pays him 10 grand. He comes out of the tailor's office, and of course, his right hand is like this. His left foot is like this. His left waist is like this. His right shoulder is like this. This is what the guy looks like. He comes out in this beautiful suit. Two Jews are walking home from shul. They take a look. One guy tells his friend, I always said that Schwartz the tailor is the best tailor in the world. He says, why do you say so? He says, look what he did. He took a cripple and he has woven for him the most elegant, beautiful suit to give this crippled, deformed man dignity. That's what I call a good tailor. But in life, this is sometimes very true. We create for ourselves, or others create for us more often, a suit that we need to fit into. Even if that is going to cripple me emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. As long as I could say, I fit into this suit. And we sometimes do this unconsciously or subconsciously at a very young age in our formidable years. There's certain things that we define as deep expectations. What does success mean in our world? What would it take for me to get validation? What would it take for me to be liked? What would it take for me to get attention? What would it take for me to be a distinguished member in society? What would it take for me to get fake attachment? What would it take for me to get what may feel a little bit like love or affection? If I can only fit into this suit, and we develop so many coping mechanisms and survival instincts, and we fit the suit that somebody else created, while crippling ourselves so deeply and not allowing to live our true energy, to be in the flow of the divine energy that cruises through us. It's true individually, but it's also true collectively. That's what an identity crisis really means. And sometimes it's not conscious. It's not about judging anybody or yourself. It's about compassion. It's about understanding how much of my true soul, my true identity, my true energy flow, my true personality, have I compromised, have I diluted, have I crippled, again, maybe unconsciously, in order to fit into the suits that the world around me or my family or my community or my inner psyche has created because of this perception, this reality, this trauma, this wound, this experience. This is called real self-awareness, and it's painful. But on a collective level too. The Torah says that God has chosen the Jewish people to be his ambassadors to change the entire world. Oh, that explains it. Nobody even knows. The world doesn't even know why. They are so consumed by Israel, by the Jewish people. It's been this way from the day Abraham walked this planet. Abraham walked on this planet in the year 1948, since creation. 1948. It's interesting. If your kids would go back 40 years, they wouldn't recognize the world. How many of the young people sitting here even know what it means? You go into a car and your mother says, please roll up the window. You remember? You remember rolling up the window, Rahman al-Islam, one of the great psychological burdens in life? What about the rotary telephone that has to stay in the wall? So when your mother had to have a private conversation about you and your problems, she pulled the telephone, you remember, through the kitchen, into the bedroom. The wire broke, the telephone broke, and that was the end of the call. And you had to do the rotary dialing. What about the typewriter? The typewriter, you remember? With whiteout. Who knows what whiteout is? Olav Shalom. Who remembers you had to ask directions in a gas station? You went to a gas station and you never wanted to. Your wife said, stop in a gas station, you arrogant person. I don't need to. And then a few minutes later, you're on the way to Miami instead of to Manhattan. And you got into a fight and you're still arguing about it. I don't know how much Shalom Bayis Google Maps saved. I did tell Waze not to have a female voice giving directions because the men are allergic. She says make a right, he makes a left. He gets lost, he says she's an anti-Semite. This is even 40 years ago. Go back 100 years ago. For the world changed in 100 years more than it changed in 5,000 years. Nothing would be recognizable. One thing would always be recognizable: the hatred and the obsession with the Jewish people. 4,000, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. The obsession with the Jewish people, the infatuation with the Jewish people. Some love us, some hate us, some loathe us, some respect us, some admire us, some want us dead, but everyone has an opinion. Nobody is neutral, has not changed one iota. How does a rational person explain this about a people that doesn't constitute even 0.25% of civilization, for heaven's sake? The number of Jews is smaller than a statistical error on a Chinese census. Did you hear what I just said? Go back to your math class. The bottom line is, there are 2.5 billion Christians, 1.9 billion Muslims, 1.2 billion Chinese. As I'm talking, another million were born. They're having a shalom zachar. Just one life, just billion lives. We got 14 million Jews. That doesn't even make up 1%, 0.5%, 1/4% of civilization. Israel is like a match on a football field. Nobody knows that there are 56 Muslim countries around Israel. 56. There's one Jewish state the size of New Jersey. A little bigger than this tent. But all the cameras are zooming in on that match in the football field. How does one even begin to fathom this? Unless you know that every word in the Torah is true. It's authentic. When God told Abraham, I'm choosing you, by you all the nations of the world, all the families will be blessed. V'nivruchu v'chakol mishpachos ha'adama v'atem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim v'go kodesh kirak eschem ahafti eschem amar Hashem kirak eschem bachar Hashem atem amat, etc. Verse after verse where Moses tells the Jewish people, you are at the vortex of the universe. You're the eye of the storm, consciously or unconsciously. You were chosen by the creator of the world to be the moral voice of sanity and conscience, to be mentors for the world and define what is true, what is not true, what is false, what is real, what is good, what is evil. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, alav shalom, Britain's chief rabbi, once said something unforgettable. We all know there's a mitzvah in the Torah, you're not allowed to count Jews. In the book of Exodus, Kisis, you're not allowed to count Jews. So how do you count Jews? Zeh yitnu. Everybody gives a coin, a machzis, a shekel, and you count the coins. Till today, you go to a shul, they're looking for a minyan, nobody's counting anybody. Somebody comes into a shul the first time, it's the strangest thing. Not one, not two, not three, not four. Or even better, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. Let's go eat. Or Hashia es hamecha. Come on, just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. What's going on? It's so strange. Like, do we have to be strange about everything? Everything? Like, enough weird customs, right? The other day there was a Chabad rabbi. He needed a minyan Friday night. He only had 9 people in the Chabad house. So what does he do? He goes outside, waits for somebody who has a Jewish nose, says, are you Jewish? Of course. Would you come in for 10, 15 minutes to do the minyan? He says, no, I don't believe in organized religion. Thank God the Chabad rabbi never took English. He looks at him and he says, do I look organized? He came in. Don't worry, this religion is not organized. I come from Muncie. There's a big vision at Shul. There's a big vision at Shul. Okay, so some zealot, whatever, I'm not going to, some zealot did not like that by Hakafas, the women are looking over the mechitza to see the men dancing. So what did he do? He put honey on top of the mechitza, so when the women come, you know what happens when the honey gets on whatever it gets on. So the rabbi was very, very upset. So he called, there's an African-American cleaning man there who cleans the shul. And he says, did you see somebody come here before the holidays and put honey? He says, of course I saw. Why didn't you stop him? He says, Rabbi, with all due respect, you have to understand what else I saw. I saw one night thousands of chickens come in here. And everybody was with chickens over their heads. Zeh chalifasi, zeh tmurasi, zeh kaparasi, zeh this. The next day, everybody's giving honey cake, distributing honey cake to everybody. Then I see you shaking a citrus, willows, myrtle branches, on palm branches, shaking, closing your eyes, swaying back, forth, up, down. I'm supposed to know that honey on the mechitza is weird? I'm sure that's the tradition. You put honey on the mechitza to make marriages sweet and romantic. Isn't that what everybody wants? To remind the couples how sweet their spouses are, especially on one side of the mechitza, towards the other side of the mechitza, because it's easy to forget. What's wrong with counting Jews? The answer is as follows. Why does anybody make a census? We make a census to flex muscles. If Microsoft tells you we have 10,000 employees, Google tells you we have 20,000 employees, it demonstrates power. A country says we have 1 million troops, 2 million troops, don't start up. We have a labor force of 300 million. That means taxes, revenue is high. God knew that if you're going to count Jews, it's going to be depressing. Jews will ask a question. There's no way statistically we can survive, never mind thrive, never mind change the world, bring Mashiach. It's impossible. God says, don't count Jews. I'm telling you, don't count them. It's going to be depressing. You want to count them? Zayitnu. Count their contributions. Look at what they give. Look at what they have given. Look at what they give. Look at what they will give. That's how you count Jews. I'm not going to be now like your Uncle Harry at Thanksgiving and go through the list of Jewish Nobel Prize recipients. There's always an Uncle Harry by Thanksgiving who knows the 900 Jews. But it's a fascinating thing. Always in the baseball season, it's a mitzvah to talk about baseball. It's a mitzvah medivrei seifrim at least. But it's interesting. You know, when you go to a Major League Baseball game and you'll have 30,000 or 40,000 spectators and 18 players. Most of the space is occupied by the spectators, but the attention is always on the players. What do the spectators do throughout the game? Some drink. The Jews eat chicken nuggets, French fries. Some are drinking twigs of beer, vodka, other drinks. Some are dancing, hollering, cursing, saying pugnacious things, repulsive, vulgar things. Some people get upset and they go home. There's a lot of cheering, there's a lot of booing. What do the players do while all this is going on? They know that their job is to play and hit the ball out of the park. They don't get affected by the boos, they don't even get affected by the cheers, because they're too busy playing a game. Well, our planet is a giant stadium, the size of 197 million square miles. A lot of spectators. And in the center, there is a little tiny court, 0.4% of the stadium. It's called Israel. And over there you have the players, less than 1/4% of the spectators. The spectators boo and the spectators cheer, and it's impossible to understand the story of history if we don't get this. Let's face it, it was not comfortable for American Jews to accept that the Torah is true. But there's no way of understanding and beginning to comprehend Jewish history without it. This is the greatest and deepest truths of history. That the Jewish people were chosen to change the world, to lead the world, to speak truth to the world, to be ambassadors of love, kindness, empathy, healing, redemption, godliness, holiness, to sanctify the world, to elevate it, to sublimate it, to turn it into a divine abode, to saturate it with goodness, with kindness, with morality. Friends, this is what happened. A year later, we're here. And when I think about October 7th, I don't know the pasuk, this verse comes to mind. The beginning of Bereshis. God creates the world. V'ha'aretz ha'isa soyu v'vayu v'choshech al pnei sahim. The world is chaotic. Soyu v'vayu. Choshech. There is darkness on the face of the abyss. That was October 7th. Choshech al pnei sahim. A darkness that we haven't seen in our lifetime. 250 hostages languishing in the hellish tunnels of Hamas. More than 100 still there. 1,300 slaughtered that day. 3,000 wounded. Hundreds of soldiers, angelic soldiers, killed in the following months. The wounded, the pain, the grief, the rivers of tears and the funerals. The bloodshed that still continues. Unfathomable. But something else also happened. Right after that is V'ruach Elokim mirachefes al pnei hamayim. The Spirit of God hovers above the water, and the Medrash says, Zeruche shel Mashiach, it's the Spirit of redemption hovering above the water. And that's October 8th. Something fascinating has happened in the last few weeks. There was a change in the morale of the Jewish people. in Israel and around the world. A change in the spirit. It began because of extraordinary victories of Israel and really divine, graceful miracles that we have seen literally in the last few weeks. It began a few months ago. Probably on the 5th of Nisan, the month of redemption, a few days before Pesach, when Iran sent 300 cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and rockets. 99% were intercepted outside of Israel. It was unbelievable. In May, Abraham Raisi, the president of Iran, died in a helicopter crash. He is the one who planned those attacks in April. Who knows what else he was planning? In July, Ismail Henya was killed in his room in Iran, 2 o'clock in the morning, when he came to the inauguration of the new president. And then, of course, came September 17th, with this spectacular explosion of all the beepers and all the pagers, killing 12 terrorists and wounding around 3,000 Hezbollah monsters. The Washington Post, I saw, just did an investigative article about it and revealed two things that were quite incredible. And that is, Hezbollah essentially paid Israel to assemble these beepers, pagers, and walkie-talkies that destroyed them. They didn't know it. Because Hezbollah hired a company in Taiwan. Taiwan needed to outsource the work. Somebody said Israel is great. So the work was done in Israel, and they planted these devices in Israel. So Hezbollah, who paid Taiwan, was paying Israel. Hezbollah paid Israel for their destruction. They did something else that was incredible. And that is, usually, you check a beeper, you check a pager with one finger, one hand. But a message came at that moment. There's an encrypted message, and in order to open it and read it, you have to use both hands because you have to press two buttons simultaneously. So both hands exploded so they wouldn't be able to come back to fight. Of course, September 27th, the Hitler of our generation, the Haman of our generation, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed. And as we know, a few hours later, his successor was killed. And then his successor's successor was killed, to the point that they announced today they're not appointing another successor. They're going to be part of a Vaad, of a council. And one day the right successor will come to power. This makes Jews feel good. I saw Douglas Murray, who should always be remembered as one non-Jew who stood up for Israel. V'gam charvayna zacher latayv. And I saw him speaking the other day to Barry Weiss, and he was saying, you know, Jews tell me that it says, b'nefol oivecha al tismach. When your enemy is defeated, you shouldn't be happy. So they shouldn't rejoice so much. But he says, but I'm not Jewish. I'm allowed to rejoice. Of course, it's also a misquote, because the Jews were very happy when the Egyptians drowned. The angels, God didn't want the angels to sing because heaven awaits the day when there's no evil in the world to eliminate. But people down here who are facing the evil and have to destroy the evil need to celebrate. This was incredible. And then, of course, 2 days before Rosh Hashanah, the 28th of Elul, when Iran sent 200 ballistic missiles. People don't know what a ballistic missile is. A ballistic missile damages an area of 1.3 kilometers, could kill 115,000 people that are there. And that was the goal. And that's one ballistic missile. 200 ballistic missiles, most of them intercepted outside of Israel. The few that made it into the airspace killed one Arab in Yericho, one Arab in Jericho. These are divine, extraordinary miracles. There's terrible tragedies. The terror attacks, the deaths of the soldiers. But the world was stunned and shocked. Even Jews were shocked when they read about those beepers and those pagers. Everybody was stunned and overwhelmed. And they asked a very big question. The Israeli Air Force, who managed to take out Nasrallah, who was in an underground bunker with 8 bombs Friday afternoon, when he was in his bunker right before Shabbos, September 27th, they managed to take him out with 8 bombs. They managed to take out Ismail Henya in Iran. They managed to challenge Iran's hundreds and hundreds of ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, rockets. And they couldn't deal with the bicycles and the pickup trucks right at their border. What happened to this Air Force? What happened? A whole day of Jews being tortured and slaughtered and killed and mutilated. And there was no army. There was no Air Force. Nobody understands. Nobody could fathom this. What happened? It's an incredible question. And I'm not going to stand there and tell you that I have the answer. But I do want to share one thing that I think is very, very true. Israel did not lack the capabilities on October 7th. What happened was the psyche of the Jewish people has become very damaged. We have become very, very crippled. I grew up by the Lubavitcher Rebbe for many years. From the 6-Day War and on, he begged every Israeli prime minister, from Eshkol to Rabin to Menachem Begin, of course Peres and Netanyahu, all of them, Arik Sharon, everybody. He begged them and pleaded with them. He said, you are making a catastrophical error. Every compromise that you make with Nazis will come back to haunt you. Every piece of territory that you cede will come back to destroy you. You have to learn how to win. God has made miracles for you. He wants the Jewish people in Israel. You don't know how to win. You are embarrassed. You are scared to tell the world this is God's eternal inheritance to the Jewish people forever and ever and ever and ever. It's non-negotiable. You want to live here as guests and behave like mention? Great. If not, go somewhere else. You never had the guts to say it, and therefore they never got the message that you won. Jews have such a hard time winning because of the trauma of 2,000 years in exile. They lack the pride and the dignity to be able to stand up to the world and to themselves and tell all their neighbors, Didan Notzach, we won and this is forever. It's God's inheritance to us, absolutely. It's very hard for Jews to do this. Ruth Weiss, a professor in Harvard, she once said, when a Jew makes a fist, the next step is Hashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Debarnu Doifi. Puerto Rican makes a fist, go check your nose and your ribs. Jews make fists, Al-Chet, 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 Al-Chet. The Knesset once had a meeting, what to do about the economy in Israel. It was very bad then. So one guy said, let's declare war on America. America will wipe us out like they did with Japan and Germany. Then they'll feel guilty. They'll rebuild us into an economic superpower. An old Jew gets up in the Knesset. He says, it's a great idea, but what happens if we win the war? A year later, after so much blood, and I pray this continues, it seems like some leaders in Israel at least got it. Cancer you don't compromise with. It will destroy you completely. And you know what else happens? The world celebrates Israel. Israel has not been saluted and cheered for like this since Entebbe. Every time it stretched out its throat, peace, peace, peace. It was cut up piece by piece by piece. People compare October 7th to a mini Holocaust, and I understand why. And I don't mean to challenge that, but it's very, very different. Because the Jewish people did not give Hitler Germany and Czechoslovakia. We gave them Gaza. The Jewish people did not give Hitler his army. We gave Arafat his police force. The Jewish people did not give Hitler Poland. He conquered it. We gave Hezbollah Lebanon. We did it. We did it. Of course they want to destroy us. Of course. But it was Jews who did not understand what it means to be a Jew. It was Jews who did not understand what Israel is. It was Jews who didn't understand the gift. It was Jews who didn't understand what the world really needs from the Jewish people, because we are fitting into a suit that's crippling us, for heaven's sake. And when you fit into a suit that cripples you, you become a cripple. And a year later, everybody's like, wow, they explode 3,000 pagers in Hezbollah's place in Lebanon. It was a mindset shift. It's not you can't, it's you don't want. You need to have a vision, you need to have resolve, you need to have clarity. One of my favorite Hasidic stories about the Baal Shem Tov, he was sitting in a synagogue in Mezhebush in Ukraine, and he was teaching his students. It was a rainy, cold day in Ukraine, and a Gentile Ukrainian was on his horse and buggy, and it fell into a ditch in the mud. And he sees a little shul, if you're ever in Ukraine, the Baal Shem Tov's shul in Mezhebush, and he goes to the window and he puts his head in, and he turns to one of the students and he says, could you come please help me take out my wagon and my horse from the mud? And the man doesn't want to leave the Baal Shem Tov. Who would want to? So he says what we would say as polite Americans. He says, I'm so sorry, but I can't. I can't. And the man responded in Ukrainian, and the Hasidim loved the story so much, they still repeat what he said in the words that he said it. He said, Modzits don ye choches. Any Russians here? Modzits don ye choches. You can, you just don't want. The Baal Shem Tov's face began beaming. He said, students, you have learned now the most important lesson of today and maybe of your lifetime. We often say, I can't, I don't have the potential. No. You don't even imagine what type of potential you have. You were chosen by God to change the world. You have incredible potential, but you have to believe it. You have to want it. You have to have the resolve, the clarity, the vision, the perspective, the leadership. And suddenly in the last few weeks, you see the language has changed. Even Biden, between one nap and another nap, thanked Israel for what they did to Nasrallah. Afilu Rabbi Yosef Biden. Somebody asked me, what's the definition of consciousness? I said, it's the annoying time between naps. Jews were chosen to be lions, not mice. Moral warriors, not wimps. Leaders. Mamleches Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh, not with arrogance, with divine confidence. This is good, this is evil, this is true, this is false, this is light, this is darkness. And the world respects Jews who respect Judaism, who respect their faith, their heritage, their homeland, their truth. They're embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. Of course, you have the kranke Jews, sick Nebuch Jews who are so traumatized by the Holocaust, they'll blame themselves for everything. Even in Auschwitz, they would blame themselves. I heard a Jew say that, that's October 7th, like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. You have something, people are very, very sick. But the majority of Jews, this is the mashber, a breakdown in Jewish identity, in Jewish history, that can give birth to a new nation, to a new child, to be able to accept the miracles of our generation, to be able to celebrate them, by understanding what Torah is, that it's true, it's authentic, it's divine. Don't be crippled, don't be a hunchback. The world knows it. You're the only one who has to know it. Nobody thinks Israel is a regular people. We're the only ones who say we're just another democracy. The leaders of Israel prided themselves that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. That's not a compliment in the Middle East. When you say you're a democracy in the Middle East, it's like telling Hitler, I'm a democracy. Really, we couldn't care less. It means we can only destroy you. I once heard a story from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael. Very powerful story. He said there was a hurricane, and the hurricane destroyed all the nests of birds, and a poor farmer felt bad. So after the hurricane, he went to look around if any nests were still intact, and he found the nest of an eagle still had one egg, and the egg seemed whole. So the farmer took the eagle's egg and brought it to his farm and put it into the chicken coop. And the chicken, not knowing the difference, sat on that egg as it sat on all the other eggs. And indeed, a little while later, a little chick came out. We knew it's an eagle, but everybody thought it's just a chick. And this eagle, who thought it was a chicken, grew up among chickens. And it walked around the coop all day, looking for food all day and all night, as chickens do. Its head was always stuck in the ground, looking for another grain, looking for another sand, another morsel of bread, another crumb. That's what this eagle did its entire life, joining the chickens in their chabura. And then one day, the eagle or the chicken was already an older guy. He was already from the Skenim. And one day, he's sitting in the chicken coop with all the chickens, kukuri, and he looks up. And he sees this most majestic, graceful eagle flying across the horizon. And he emits a sigh, a krechts. And he says, if I could only be an eagle. No chicken ever expressed that prayer. A chicken doesn't want to be an eagle. A chicken wants to be a chicken. The reason this chicken begged to be an eagle is because it wasn't a chicken, it was an eagle. All the anxiety that we have as individuals and as collective people, it's because chickens know they're not, because eagles know they're not supposed to be chickens, they're supposed to be eagles. And whenever I'm not in touch with my truest soul and my truest energy, there's pain, there's anxiety. But you know what could make that eagle feel it's an eagle? Not screaming at it, modeling for it what it means to be an eagle. Modeling. Showing. We think we're going to tell our children and our students, don't be a chicken, you idiot, be an eagle. I never saw anybody changing from being shamed. can you model to me what it looks like to be an eagle? And then you can stir up and trigger and arouse those heartstrings, l'chol shirayich ani kinor, those heartstrings in my heart's violin that aspire to fly like an eagle. The Jewish people were not chosen to be chickens, they were chosen to be eagles, to inspire the world with majesty. We are the ones who pray on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, V'sim loich ata Hashem Elokeinu levadecha, V'yeda kol pol ki ata piyalta, V'yovin kol yitzur ki ata yitzartoi, V'yoymar kol asher neshama v'yapoi, Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Melech u'malchusoi b'kol mashallah. The Jews are praying for the world. Let the world become a place of redemption. Let the world become a place of authenticity. Let every grain of sand, flake of snow, droplet of water, every creature, every bird, shrub, bush, tree, every mammal, every fish, every animal, every creature, every human being. V'yeda kol pol ki ata piyaltoi. Let the entire world place its mouth on the mouth of the Jewish people and say together, Yizgadol v'yizkada shmei Rabbah. When we become like chickens and cripple ourselves with shame and embarrassment, nobody applauds the Jewish people, quite the contrary. Now you're sitting here and saying, okay, I agree, maybe I disagree. If you're a good Jew, it's fine. Still true. What does that have to do with me? A little while ago, I was in Israel, and I visited Ra'anana, and there's an American rabbi there, Israeli-American. His name is Rabbi Eliada Goldwicht. His father is Rosh Hashiva in YU, Yeshiva Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan. He's a rabbi there for the American community. So he took me around, and one of the people he shared with me, he met, is somebody named Eliasaf Maria. Eliasaf Maria lives in the south of Israel. And he told me that he heard this story directly from him, so I'm sharing what I heard from Rabbi Goldwicht, who heard it from Eliasaf Maria. Eliasaf Maria by vocation is a dyer, he's a painter. If you would have asked him a year ago and 2 days, October 6th, what do you do for a living? He would say, I'm a dyer, I'm a tzoveya in Hebrew, I'm a painter. You know, in the south of Israel, every block, they have a few miguniyot. Miguniyot are shelters, rooms that are reinforcement, rooms of concrete, because the rockets coming from Gaza, more than 20,000 rockets coming from Gaza, you have sometimes 5 or 10 seconds to run in and protect yourself, be in shelter. So that's why in every block they have miguniyot, these little rooms, and you go in there, have reinforced concrete. So a mother and her children, a father and his children, or anybody walking, and the siren goes over, they have 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, they can run into one of these places and protect themselves till the siren is gone. He had one of these in front of his house, and they're very ugly because they're made of concrete. You know what they look like when it rains? They have this grayish, depressing color, and they remind you why you're there. You're there to protect yourself from rockets. And he didn't like it. So Eliasaf is a painter, so what did he do? He went to the migunit in front of his house, and he painted it beautifully. He depicted it with colorful, playful images, so that children who may run in there with their mothers, with their fathers, with their siblings, and they spend there a half an hour, 2 hours, they should at least be surrounded by playful images. So he had, for example, an image of an angelic girl laughing. It would be like these images you might find in a daycare center or a kids' school or maybe a doctor's office for children or a dentist's office for children, where children feel, light, geschmacke, delightful colors. The head of the municipality saw this, and he really liked it, so he hired him to paint all of the miguniyot in southern Israel. It was a nice job, so he went and he did that. And each one he painted differently. Each one, he made a special image. One was a little boy laughing, a little girl laughing, a kindergarten, playing in the sand, playing at the water, a sunrise, a sunset, a beautiful garden, different colors of roses and flowers. Each one a different picture. Fine. He was paid, and life moves on. He's a religious Jew. He lives in the south of Israel, not right at the border. In the morning, he comes home from shul, Simchas Torah, and the phone is ringing. He doesn't pick it up. He's not in the army. He's not in the police. He's an older fellow. He's not in the reserves. He doesn't pick it up, but the phone doesn't stop ringing. At some point, he picks it up. It's the police. They say, we must have you. What? What's going on? There are Jews calling us from all the miguniyot. Remember, 3,000 rockets fell, 6:15 in the morning. Before the terrorists came in, they first blinded Israel because everybody thought it's just 3,000 rockets and that's it. They didn't know what's coming after the rockets. So everybody ran into a migunit. So the police told him, El Yasaf, there are Jews stranded in these miguniyot and they're calling the police for help. So we asked them, what's your address? They don't know an address. How do they know? They were walking, they ran in. Whether it's from the Nova, wherever they were, they ran in. As you know, many Jews were killed in these miguniyot. They don't know an address. So we asked them, is there any sign that you can tell us? They say, all we can say is the picture that's in the room. And we know that you did them. So maybe you can help us. And indeed, El Yasaf knew the location of every single one, and he directed the police. This is the image, this is the exact location. This is the image, this is the exact location. Many, many Jews were saved that day because of him. And then it dawned on me, I realized, if you would have asked him 2 days before, what do you do for a living? He would have said, I'm a dyer, I'm a painter. He didn't realize that every time he was painting one of these muguniyot, he was preparing to save lives. But then I realized something else. The Talmud says in Sanhedrin that every person is supposed to say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. The world was created for me. Is that real? Or it's just fiction? Is that drama? Come on, the world was created for me. The world was created for you. Every person says the world was created for me. 7 billion people. What does that even mean? Then I realized, if the police would have called up the Prime Minister of Israel, and say, Bibi, we need your help. You're the Prime Minister. Tell us where these Jews are. What would Mr. Netanyahu say? Slichani lo yadeya. If they would have called up Mr. Galant, the Defense Minister, Sara Bitachon ta'azor lanu. Ani lo yadeya. If they would have called up the Ramatkal, the Joint Chief of Staff, if they would have called up the head of the Mossad, the head of Shabak, the head of Amman, if they would have called up the top mefakdim, the top commanders or generals in the IDF, everybody would say the same thing. We don't know. There was only one man living in Israel by the name of El Yasaf Maria who can help guide the police that day. And that's what the sages were saying. The world was created for me, for you. There's something at stake in your existence that only you and I can accomplish and achieve in this world that nobody, including great, great people, accomplished, powerful, interesting, holy people and sages can't accomplish. B'shvili nivra ha'olam. So when we ask ourselves, God chose the Jewish people, but I'm not the Prime Minister, I'm not running the army, I'm not the defense minister, I'm not even in the Knesset, I'm not in the war cabinet, I'm not making the decisions what to do with Hamas, with Hezbollah. Don't underestimate what it means to be a Jew living at any time, especially today. Every person in their world, in their community, in their home, in their own soul, to let go of a suit that cripples you, that cripples us. To let go of an image that the lion has to be a mouse and the eagle needs to be a chicken. Now you understand why that Marty and Jack named it Just One Life. Just one life. They already saved 23,000 lives. Just this year, close to 1,000 lives. 400 of the regular numbers and more than 500 of the evacuees. 502 women, as Azi said earlier, who were being evacuated from all of the war zones, both in the south and in the north. 60,000 Jews were exiled from the north. No other country would tolerate this for a whole year. 60,000 Jews, 502 women wanting to give birth in crisis came to just one life. Just one life. But it's really just one life. B'shvili nivra ha'olam. For me, for this child, for you, for this one little girl or one little boy, the world was created. That's what Judaism's sacred faith is. And with El Yasaf, I saw it. There was a shlichus, there was a mission that only he the entire Jewish world and in the entire Israel can accomplish. Not because he's the smartest, and not because he is the most powerful, and not because he has the most political connections or is the most wealthy, or is the most affluent. No, he was a dyer, but as his painter. Mi yodeya im la'eit kazot higat lamalchus, as Mordechai told Esther. Hamas chose the date October 7th. One reason was because the Yom Kippur War happened October 6th, 1973. So this was 50 years to the day after the Yom Kippur War. October 7th, 2023, 50 years literally the Yom Kippur War. Another reason, of course, was the first year war was to destroy our Yom Kippur. The second war was designated to destroy our Simchas Torah. That's what it was for. In fact, a few months ago I was invited to do a Shabbaton with survivors of the Nova Music Festival. 150 people who were there, young, in their 20s mostly, came for a Shabbaton to the David Citadel Hotel in Jerusalem, and we spent the whole Shabbos together. It was done by Kesher Yehudi. Ralph Reeder sponsored it from Muncie, and he invited me, and it was an amazing Shabbos. At lunch, there was a Ger Chassid there. His name is Yisrael Goldwasser. He's a historian. And he gets up to speak with a Sefer Torah. Who gets up to speak at lunch in a hotel with a Sefer Torah? And he's speaking to everybody in Hebrew. And he says, you see this Torah scroll? They say, yeah. There's 150 survivors. And many of them, by the way, came from religious homes. They left Judaism, a lot of them. I saw they knew all the songs very, very well. They grew up in religious homes. They left Judaism, so they were at the music festival. Quite an interesting group over there. There were a few thousand Jews there. A few hundred were killed, but they wanted to kill 3,000. So 150 came to the Shabbaton. So he introduces this Torah scroll. He says, you know what's unique about this Torah scroll? Nobody knew. I also didn't know. He said, this Torah scroll was written 150 years ago, but it's the one Torah scroll that survived the Holocaust, that made it into the Chesnichov Nazi concentration camp in Poland. And the Jewish people would read from it in the barracks. They would read in this Sefer Torah Monday, Thursday, Shabbos until the Nazis caught them. They confiscated the Torah. A Jew who had connections went into the room and he took the Torah out and he brought it back into the barrack and they hid it inside a beam. And on Simchas Torah they took it out and they danced with it at night in the Chesnichov concentration camp in the barrack on Simchas Torah. And there was a Ger Chassid who survived. And he took the Torah with him after the war and he brought it to Israel. And it's in the shul where he davens. And he says, Simchas Torah in the morning, October 7th, I was dancing with this Torah when we heard the sirens and started to hear the news of what's happening. The rabbi never lets the Sefer Torah leave the shul because it's old, it's fragile, it went through so much history. There's even blood. You could see on the Torah the blood. The Nazis were beating the Jews when they caught them reading the Sefer Torah. The blood stains are still on the Sefer Torah. It's crazy. But I told the rabbi, I'm coming Shabbos to be with the music festival survivors. He let me take the Torah. And he looked at them and he said, listen, you guys were dancing Simchas Torah in the morning at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6:30. Your dancing was interrupted by thousands and thousands and thousands of bullets and rockets and RPGs and machetes and swords and knives and grenades. I know you weren't dancing hakafas. This was a music festival. But your dancing was interrupted. So I want to ask all of you, come up. I want each and every one of you to take this Torah scroll that survived the Nazis, and I want you to continue your dance of October 7th in the morning, but this time it's going to be hakafas. Everybody came up. There was a big stage. There was a group of mezamrim singing songs, and every one of the survivors took the Torah and was dancing around and around. It was hard to see a dry eye in the crowd, but it was such a powerful symbol of the words that Netanyahu said in the UN last Friday, the General Assembly, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, the words of Shmuel Hanavi to show, the eternity of Israel will not lie. It was so powerful to be able to see that. And they were so moved, it touched them so much, it gave them that eternal connection. B'shvili nivra ha'olam. Every single one has that mission, that shlichus, in this time of history, to be able to become an ambassador of unwavering conviction, confidence, and divine truth. And one of the greatest organizations that lives up to this model and has understood that it has to quadruple its efforts since October 7th because of the crisis. So 502 extra babies born from evacuees who had to leave their homes and go into exile, living in hotels or kibbutzim or scattered all over the country, was just one life to be able to help these mothers have the confidence, the mental space, and a little bit serenity amidst so many upheavals to be able to give birth to these hundreds and hundreds of children, each one on whom we say, B'shvili nivra ha'olam. For Hamas, the more of their civilians that die, the better it is. It demonizes Israel. Every Arab who dies in Gaza, they make shachiyano. If you can kill 100 children, it's the biggest simchas Torah in the world. For the Jewish people, Hamakayim Nefesh Achat B'Yisrael, Olam Malay. You preserve one life, you preserve the world. Everyone you say, for him, for her, the world was created. The simchas Torah is what they wanted to destroy. The joy of Jewish life. The festivities of Jewish life. And that's why this year, it's a mitzvah for Jews to celebrate their Jewishness. It's a mitzvah for Jews to celebrate their Yiddishkeit. It's a mitzvah for Jews to celebrate their identity. It's a mitzvah for Jews to celebrate Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah like never before. And Mazel Tov for each of these close to 1,000 children born by just one life. Each one of them a whole universe. Unfortunately, we have lost thousands and thousands of universes this year. And that's why each of these universes is so infinitely precious. And I thank each and every one of you for being part of this great, great endeavor. Until the moment when all of us will finally find within ourselves the true courage to be able to declare to the world, Hashem hu Elokim, to be able to declare to the world that Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is God's eternal gift to an eternal people as an eternal inheritance. Until the great moment when the world will finally be transformed and the spirit of toxicity and impurity will be removed with a complete victory and a complete redemption. Amen. Thank you. Shana Tova.